So again, welcome to the second session in which we'll try to understand if and how the RenDanHeYi may work in different organizations, in different cultures, in different sizes of companies, and also in different parts of the world. Right now, we have Thailand, we have Italy, and we have different countries in Italy. So we'll see what happens. Let me say that the goal for today is not for me to teach you anything, actually. It's really for us to discuss, to interact, and to share stories. But I will give a very brief intro for those of you that probably never heard about the RenDanHeYi. And actually, I will share a bit from our recent release of an adoption guide on the RenDanHeYi. So it will be, let's say, the starting point of this conversation. And after that, we'll use a mirror board. Actually, I will share the link right now with you for the board. And the invitation will be to add your own questions into the board. You will find already my questions, or better, the questions that participants to our masterclasses usually are interested to discuss, and Stephanie can provide testimony of that. But I will start from your own questions. So at the bottom of these two boards, you will find empty places in which you can write your own questions. So before going into that, let me share just a bit of content to let everybody to, let's say, be on the same page. Just stop me in case you have questions. Let's make this interactive. For some of you, this is not new, I know that, but I want to bring everybody at the same level. So the topic of today is, will the RenDanHeYi work for me? And we decided to address this topic because there is quite a frequent attitude towards the RenDanHeYi of the kind, well, I'm not hired, this is never going to work, it's too difficult, it's too extreme. Many reasons, let's say, for avoiding considering the RenDanHeYi. So the purpose is to share what we have learned so far and to discuss about strategies for facilitating the experimentation and the adoption. And we'll do it as a community. So let's jump into it. Again, like last time, a really quick 1-minute introduction to the RenDanHeYi. So if this is your first time looking at the RenDanHeYi, or if you just want to have a quick recap, that's it. The RenDanHeYi is the organizational model that Haier has developed over 30 years, so in China, and that tries to infuse a much higher level of entrepreneurship in your organization, getting rid of bureaucracy, getting rid of delays, many managerial layers. And as you can tell from this picture, there is no organization chart in the RenDanHeYi. Haier is a company with 80,000 people and 4,000 micro enterprises. So the first concept is that everything, quite everything in Haier, it's a small autonomous team called a micro enterprise. It's not just a team, it's really a micro enterprise because the level of freedom and autonomy that the team enjoys is much broader, much bigger than everything that you may have seen with Agile or other approaches. There are two types of micro enterprises. Some of them are customer-facing user micro enterprises. Some of them provide business services to their colleagues, and they are called node micro enterprises. Right now, Haier has 4,000 of them. Most of them, 3,700 are node micro enterprises, 300 are user MEs. The second concept that has been suggested by the company itself, not by the board or by the CEO, the former CEO, Jiang Ruimin, is the concept of the ecosystem micro community. The ecosystem microcommunity is a way to facilitate the collaboration between different micro enterprises. Because being inspired by the market, micro enterprises can actually compete. So we may have two micro enterprises providing services to the same customer segment, to the same region, or really through the same product and experiences. So there is competition in micro enterprises, but Hire and its people also wanted to have collaboration between micro enterprises to do what? To satisfy sophisticated, complex, evolving, higher value user needs. So you create an EMC because you want to build something that no individual micro enterprise can produce in isolation. An ecosystem micro community, it's not an organizational entity. It's not a part of the organizational structure like a micro enterprise is. It is instead a contract. So it's an agreement in which different parties, different micro enterprises decide what they want to bring together or what they want to obtain. Again, we have two types of EMCs. One is the experience EMC, providing services and interacting directly with the market. And the other one is the solution EMC that is internally focused, so providing service to their colleagues. The third concept is how to apply these same unbundling ideas, these ideas of fragmentation of the firm in many small entrepreneurial teams, also to support functions. Think about HR, think about legal, think about IT, and so on. So shared service platforms are a way to tell to our colleagues that are usually very distant from the market, that provide the internal standard services to all micro enterprises, to give the same value for money, to feel a bit of the pressure that comes from the market, trying to reduce the bureaucracy and the delay, and trying to collaborate with their business, let's say, centered colleagues to give value to the client. So the HR function, the finance function, the IT function are also decomposed in many small teams. Think about the recruiting team, or think about the rewarding team. All of them expose some services, a bit like APIs, programming interfaces, to the rest of the organization. And they have to justify, if you want, their existence by selling their services to their colleagues or to the market. There is a second type of platform. Second type of platform is called an industry platform. And this is an attempt to open up strategy. Strategy has always been called by the board, by the CEO. In this case, it's an open process in which industry platforms, there are only a few of them, give a direction. A direction could be the Internet of Food, the smart home. So, a priority and an investment to the rest of the firm. So what Hire is saying is that this year, we're going to invest in these 6, 7, 8 priorities. We're going to put money on the table. And as a matter of fact, we are transforming a corporation into a sort of incubator that puts money on the table around some strategic directions, and that the micro enterprises and the EMCs can take as investments to build their own products and services, to bring them to the market, and to generate profit for themselves and for the rest of the firm. So this is in a nutshell what the RenDanHeYi is. So there is really no hierarchy. The amount of hierarchy is minimal. There is no control because the teams are largely autonomous. There is consistency, though. There is a bit of coherence through these shared service platforms and these industry platforms. During the discussion, we'll have space. So for those of you that want to know more, that have questions about these concepts, so this is a very short, let's say, recap, you can ask questions also about the model. At Boundaryless, our goal is not so much to convince you about the RenDanHeYi or to convince you to copy the RenDanHeYi. It's about convincing you to reflect on the RenDanHeYi and trying to compare some of the principles, the practices, the solutions that the RenDanHeYi has been experimenting with for 40 years in your specific environment. It could be a different industry, a different geography, a different culture. And we do that by reconnecting it to many stories, stories such as Morningstar, stories such as Burzorg, stories coming from Holacracy, from Sociocracy, from Zappos, and trying to look at common patterns, but also at differences. And we came up with this idea that actually the RenDanHeYi is just an extreme manifestation of a concept of an ecosystem, an entrepreneurial ecosystem enabling organization. An organization that tries to do three things. The first one is to unlock the entrepreneurial drive of all employees. What Sean Green was saying is that every employee should be a CEO, so should act autonomously, entrepreneurially, taking risk, exploring opportunities, finding new businesses. The second concept is that, yes, of course, you can be an entrepreneur, you can compete, not just with the market, but also with your colleagues. But we also need to collaborate. So we need ways to orchestrate the work without hierarchy. So this ecosystemic part, the EMC, is a way to facilitate co-creation, both with customers, with suppliers, with colleagues, by keeping bureaucracy at bay. We don't want to increase the amount of control. We don't want to increase the managerial layers. We want all of this to be as smooth, as lean, as dynamic as possible. The third concept is that not everything can be decentralized. We will still need in a corporation some services that will be provided the same way to everybody. Again, HR, IT services. With a catch, you can buy those services from the market if you are not happy with what your colleagues are giving you, but the services are there, and some of the revenues are going to be used to pay for these services. So we have these three layers: entrepreneurial, ecosystem, enabling, that actually are recurring in most of the experiments of organizational design of the last 40 years, with different degrees, of course, of maturity on each one of these lines. But still, this is the direction that we are seeing, because most organizations in the market want to increase their ability to innovate, their ability to engage the people, their ability to get rid of bureaucracy, their speed, their adaptiveness, reducing the cost. So these three layers at the end address needs that are universal needs. And a bit more specifically, in terms of what Hire did, if we look at these three layers, the entrepreneurial layer is the focus of the micro enterprise. So the micro enterprise is invited to look for new opportunities, to reduce the organizational and technological debt of the firm. So the invite is go on the market, look for business opportunity, take responsibility for your profit and loss, so you can decide how you want to spend the money, but also how you want to generate revenues. With only one ask: to create, to reach leading targets, to do better, much better than the market average. That's the only ask. But you have plenty of freedom on your strategy, the people that you want to have, how much you want to pay them. Again, considering that more than employees in Hire, what you have is owners in these teams, into these micro enterprises. Owners whose salary is paid by customers. So your salary is not paid by the company, it's paid by the results that you generate, so the sales, the experiences that you generate in the market. So if you do good, well, you're going to get lots of money. Otherwise, probably you won't be that happy. Hire is only providing a universal basic income to all employees. Everything else has to be generated through micro enterprises and EMCs. So the second concept, very briefly, is this EMC, and this EMC is the recognition that the only way to succeed today is to empower ecosystems of actors, both outside in the market and inside the firm. So this EMC is created by one micro enterprise that feels there is an untapped need, an untapped customer need, that builds a contract, and that invites other micro enterprises to bid, so to offer their services to address this sophisticated need. It could be about orchestrating some hardware, some software, some marketing, let's say, some new services, and so on. The actors that could be invited into the EMCs are both internal, from Hire, and external. So Boundaryless is an example of an EMC with Hire. We are in a contract with the micro enterprises in Hire. The last one is the unbundling. As I said, the unbundling is twofold. On one side, we have these high priority investment areas. And on the other side, we want to decompose support functions into micro enterprises because we know that the bureaucracy is often hidden here. This is one of the most difficult parts, one of the last parts that get addressed into the transformation. But it is also important to say that there is a technological component behind all of this. When you have not 5, not 6, but 4,000 teams that dynamically create value, they dynamically share value, you need ways to track this value exchange, you need ways to track the agreements, and in Hire, this is done through the blockchain and through smart contracts. So technically speaking, an EMC is a smart contract in which all the parties will say what they are going to bring, the SLAs they are going to respect, but also the returns that they want to have in exchange for their contribution. So these are, say, the 3 layers and how they are applied. They are applied in Hire. Very briefly, now that you have a general understanding, hopefully, of the basic concepts, what we have done 10 days ago is releasing a second edition, a renewed edition of our 3.0 toolkit. Boundary is a small company that provides lots of open source content and of course consulting services to support everybody to go towards the future of organizing. So this guide is free. You will have the link at the end of this session. You can go and download it even without leaving any data to us. So you can just use it even to compete with us if you want. In this new toolkit, you're going to find a number of new canvases, a user guide and release note that we have addressed last time, but also an adoption guide. The adoption guide is mostly what we have learned in the last 2 years. So it's our imperfect, probably non-comprehensive, maybe, arguable, if you want, set of lessons learned from consulting engagements in the last 2 years. And it's a way to suggest a number of principles and a step-by-step approach to move towards the RenDanHeYi, towards 3.0 organizations in line with some complexity principles, because we believe that what the RenDanHeYi does is really being the best example of something that we have studied in the market for more than 40 years, complex adaptive systems. It's probably one of the few big organizations that are really doing it, and that are inspiring others to do it. Why I'm talking about complex adaptive systems? Well, because the micro enterprises are like many autonomous actors into a system, because the outcomes of the system, so the many-to-many interactions are non-linear. There's no way to really predict what is going to emerge from the system. That means that there is no way to manage also what is going to emerge from the system. And this is important from a change perspective, but it's a non-linear system It's a system that interacts constantly with the market, actually gets inspired by market rules and dynamics. And it's a system that don't want to stay in equilibrium, actually want to stay far from equilibrium by having friction, redundancy, conflict, innovation. The system is really a massive experiment. So it's a way to really avoid stability and look for, aggressively look for innovation and new possibilities. And finally, the industry platforms, the shared service platforms are a way also to guarantee a bit of coherence in the system in terms of nudging the system to go in some directions instead of others. Think about industry platforms a bit like strategy. It's a bit like perturbing the system and trying to say, we want to do this, let's see what happens. All of this is in constant flux. So it's really, these are the typical traits of a complex adaptive system. And if we believe that IR and the RenDanHeYi are inspired by complex adaptive systems, well, when we talk about adopting or getting inspiration from the RenDanHeYi, we need to stay true to some principles that work well with complex adaptive systems. The first one is that, unfortunately, there is no transition from point A to point B. All of this is a living system. It's emergent, it's messy, it's unpredictable. So there is no way to say, oh, we are starting here, in 3 months we are going there. We have no clue. It's an evolution, like, organisms, it's unpredictable. The second part is that most of these, it's distributed. There is only that minimum viable amount of coherence and structure, but there is a massive distribution of decisional power to the edges of the system, to the individuals, the micro enterprises, to the EMCs, to your competitors, to your customers. The organizational design, it's also co-created. It's quite impossible to impose it from the top. So that's why we use lots of co-design techniques. And finally, we're discussing it with Andreas before, the beacon is not the belly of the organization or its support functions. It's the customer. It's outside. It's the market. It's getting rid of bureaucracy and trying to keep this clear line of sight for every individual, whether you are the CEO or you are in an HR role, with what the market wants. So very briefly, I don't want to get you bored with that. You can read it into our guide, but this is really just to stimulate a conversation and your questions. We are suggesting a 5-steps approach that goes from challenge, then to envision, co-create, pilot, and scale. What it means is that challenge is meant to connect this transformation to the strategic priorities of the firm. We believe that the trio is a unique opportunity to make your organization better able to play an ecosystemic game in the market, to act as a platform in the market. So if you want to be a bit more like eBay, a bit more like an Amazon, well, you need to infuse some of the same concepts that you want to see in the market also inside the organization. And this is the time in the project in which the senior leaders, the stakeholders, the influencers of the firm will have to realize this connection, will have to be convinced about this connection, and we'll have to wait this transformation in terms of their maturity, of their level of ambition, of customer challenges, and so on. The envision phase, it's where the co-creation happens. It's a way to engage following all-scale change and microcosm of the organization. So a representative part of the organization to come together in a big workshop and to go create a portfolio of pilots, a portfolio of opportunities. So it's a way to ask your colleagues to say, where do you see these ideas working in your business, in your relationship with the market, with the customer? So it's them making the translation of these, examples that look very far into the specific reality, the daily business challenges that they have. You're going to end up with a portfolio of, we call them evolutionary seeds, ideas. Some of them very good, some of them less so. So you're going to pick some of those by looking also at the resonance with the strategy, the feasibility, the amount of resources that you have, and then run a second co-creation exercise with these different ideas, with different teams to understand how to create a pilot from them. So what kind of services you need, what kind of training you need, what kind of investments you need, technologies you need to create a blueprint for each one of those pilots, of those ideas. Then you run with the ideas, you experiment with them, you run sprints, you validate the ideas, and you kill those that don't function. But you also, and this is the scale phase, you learn from those pilots by building the new organizational model. So you will find out there are some common needs cutting across all the pilots in terms of maturity, in terms of technology, in terms of organizational design. But at this point, you will know exactly what is needed. You have proof, examples, quick wins, and also examples of failures that you can translate into a new model. So as you can see in this picture, actually, this is not a sequential process. There are a number of callbacks. It's a loop. So the pilot will tell you that the design was wrong. The scale will tell you that there are some constraints that you miss. And overall, this is a flux. This is an ongoing process in which you will start new pilots, will keep improving the model. The model will influence the pilots in a never-ending, let's say, transformation journey. So that's our approach to it. If you want to know more about this, well, it's free. It's there. So it's bless without the e.io/trio toolkit. We invite you to download it and especially to play with it and to give us your feedback. Tell us how you decided to use it, if there is something that you see missing or something that anyway you will feel valuable to add. Really, it's our contribution to the community, and it's based on our experience. So the focus for today was just to give you this minimum amount, let's say, of intro for discussing together. If you want to know more, we have also a masterclass coming up in September. Some of the people in this room attended some of those masterclasses, so they can criticize us or say good things about us. But again, the idea is more than teach you anything. It's really to let you play with some of these concepts into a team setting through fictitious, let's say, cases or cases brought by you. Because our goal is really to make things change in organizations. So we want you to get out from the masterclass and to be ready to experiment with some of these concepts, not just to convince you about the RenDanHeYi. So this is really what I wanted to share with you, with the goal of opening up a conversation. And my suggestion here is to use a mirror board, the one for which you have the link in the chat, and to reflect on two areas. The first area, for those of you that may be new or they may be interested to know more about the RenDanHeYi model, is to ask questions about the RenDanHeYi model. So if you want to know more about the micro enterprise or about the salaries or about the life cycle of different units or about industry platforms, there's a chance to ask for it. So there is a first column in green, pre-populated with my questions that you can augment and reach with your own questions about the RenDanHeYi model. A second phase will be starting from these questions and discussing about transformations. in the room, we have Andreas from Make that actually did or is doing, let's say, a transformation in Thailand with the team. There is William Malek that has seen other experiences in Asia, but there is also Arianna from Intesa San Paulo that is doing it in a company with 80,000 people in Europe. So we have different levels of experience, but this is really a community space for sharing any question, whether that's very advanced or very basic. So don't worry about that. We're going to talk together and to share. And I invite you to also address other people's questions. So I don't want to do all of the talking. Actually, I would like you to share both your questions, but also your answers when you have them. So let me stop here, and let me go to the board. So I hope you have the board in front of you. If you are not able to join, just let me know. Otherwise, I will share my screen. So I see many of you on the board. Everything seems to work, but ping me if you are struggling with the technology. So let's start from the model. So the first part is about the RenDanHeYi model, the green, let's say, column. I invite you to go to the second half of the picture and just spend a few minutes filling up any call out here with your own questions. So if you have any question about the model, about the organizational artifacts, about the dynamics, about the experience, about the culture, about the results, whatever you have, feel free to share it. I will collect your own questions, and then we'll look also at the typical questions on the top on dark green that we get in master classes. They may have some more information for you. So let's spend a few minutes by sharing your own questions. So again, at the bottom, light green, Stephanie is doing that already. If you have some more questions, just write there and we'll pick them. If you are already in a very mature stage, of course, feel free to go also on the other column and start adding your questions about transformation at the bottom. Andreas is asking questions. I'm worried. Thanks, Jarek. William, new questions at the bottom, then we are going to answer to those on the top if there is interest, of course.
Emanuele, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Ciao, Francesco.
Oh, sorry, you were talking about the link in the chat.
Yeah.
I cannot see. I don't know if because I.
Yeah. Let me share it. Let me share it in the chat. Just 1 second for everybody else. Here you go. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, some of you, of course, are really working on it. So if you have questions left from our conversations, it may be a good time to share those with the team. Okay, so keep writing, but I will start to address some of them. So the first one I see is, are there roles that have to exist in every microenterprise, or are those MEs completely free about how they organize within? Okay, that's really a good question. This is something we didn't discuss today, but The RenDanHeYi, I will try to put the answer, the RenDanHeYi doesn't specify what happens within micro enterprises. Only the interfaces among micro enterprises and other structures. Let me make it smaller. So what we tend to say is that you are free to introduce other practices. Think about agile practices into the micro enterprise. Think about rituals, stand-ups, dailies, retrospectives, or you could use tools coming from Sociocracy and Holacracy, or getting things done, and so on. So there is no specific role. The only role, if you want, there is mandatory, is the ME leader. So there is at least one individual, it's usually more than one, that is responsible to bear the responsibility of how the micro enterprise is performing. It's not really a role in terms of a job position. It's more of putting the face on it when things work, but also when things don't work, and taking responsibility to build some of the scaffolding for the micro enterprise, such as looking for micro enterprise members, agreeing with them about their salaries, and so on. But this is very, very light, very basic. The micro enterprise, we believe it's much more like a black box. Okay. Going to the second question, is there any steering when it comes to market resources so that a customer has a single point of contact in the company? I don't know who wrote this. If you want to clarify maybe the question, just to be sure to address it properly.
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, if we're not talking about hire, but like a smaller example where you also already have some sort of customer base, especially if it's business to business customer.
Mm-hmm.
How can you not confuse the customers? So how is it adaptable also to the market, this kind of system? That's what I'm wondering.
Mm-hmm. So again, as always, please jump in. So for those that have experience, not just in the RenDanHeYi, but in similar environments, feel free to jump in with your ideas. So in the RenDanHeYi, the ME owner is, let's say, the face, or the ME owners are the face for the service, the product, the experience. If that's an ME, or the EMC owner, in the case, it is a collaboration between micro enterprises. That doesn't mean that the other people cannot interact with the customer. So it's not, a strict barrier. I'm the boss. Nobody is talking with anybody else. But let's say there is a single point of contact for it. But of course, very often the point of contact is technology. It's the product. It's a digital channel. So it's not only people. It's also the services that those people create. But yes, there is a central responsibility. So organizationally speaking, there is a single point of contact. So let me write it. Single point of contact is the ME owner or EMC owner. Actually, it's owners. It's not necessarily a person, plus customer channels. Again, feel free to jump in. How to? Oh, sorry, Andreas.
Sorry,
yeah.
Maybe I can offer a point of view from like what's happening with us right now in the moment, and it's not perfect, and we're not done yet, but it's like what we have currently. So we've always had a sort of client services team. So Make, the company that I run, Make is a professional services firm, and so it's about 80 people. And we have started now unbundling what I would call solution MEs. So technical implementation for specific types of customers. The client service team is still acting as the interface, being the go-to person for a customer coming to Make for the first time, and helping direct them to the MEs that they need help with. So right now they are sort of the channel. At least as it stands currently, they own the relationship. So as the customer's needs might evolve over time, they can help direct and bring in new ME owners to facilitate and provide new products and services. I don't know if that's going to maintain at some point. I believe that the customers are going to really like talking to the ME owner, because the ME owner is the expert and they know everything that has to be done, right? But at least that's the first step from having a more traditional service organization model to moving into this direction.
Thank you, Andres. Yeah, okay. I think I don't have anything to add. Moving to the next one, how to kick ME off. If I have an idea how to initiate the team, invitations from one other MEs, what about the impact on them, where to get, sorry, I'm making it a bit smaller, where to get budget. So, okay, of course, in my 5 minutes intro, there wasn't time to talk about all of it, but there is actually a concept called the valuation adjustment mechanism. There is an investment contract between the company and the micro enterprise. So it's like a VC investing in a startup. And into the toolkit, you will find a canvas for it. In the new toolkit, there is a canvas for it. What basically you are doing as a micro enterprise owner is saying, I have an idea. I see an opportunity, an untapped opportunity. I believe I can do much better than the market. Give me money, give me an investment to build something new. What the VAM includes is basically an estimation of your expenses, your capital expenses, your operational expenses, but also salaries, other costs, allowances. So it's basically really asking for money. But what you also need to fill into the VAM is a number of inflection points. So basically the outcomes that you bet to realize with that investment. So in 3 months, we are going to do this. In 6 months, we are going to do that. In 12 months, we are going to do that. And also how we are going to share the value that you have generated. Because this is ecosystemic, because the idea is that you're going to create value together with others, even if you are just a micro enterprise. And even if on top of generating profits and sharing profits within your team, you're going to generate knowledge, ideas or value for the rest of the firm. So all of that is captured into the VAM. The VAM, it's a negotiation. So you're going to ask for the money, you're going to the industry platform owner, and you will negotiate with him or her, and you will find, let's say, an agreement that works for everybody. And that's it. So, of course, there are many micro enterprises going through this life cycle, getting investments, trying to reach their leading targets, succeeding or failing. I don't know if anybody wants to add, but that's it's a distributed process. So there is no, if you want, approval process from a boss. It's, you already know what the industry platform stands for, so you know, let's say, the topics, and you go and pitch, or better, you submit a proposal into a system. But nonetheless, the idea is the same. Okay, moving to the next one. Who comes up with a strategic focus and budgets? Okay, as I said, the RenDanHeYi is not fully distributed. So this part, deciding the industry platforms and deciding the budgets, the investments that the industry platforms have, it's a responsibility of the board. So this is one of the top-down responsibilities, because there are millions and millions of dollars at play, But again, it's both top-down and bottom-up process, because while you have industry platforms, doesn't mean that you have to stick to them. If you stick to them, it will be easier to attract an investment, to get support, let's say, but you may come up also with something different. So, you know, it's not a strictly indication of what you have to do. It's a nudge into the system to facilitate some pre-shared common direction. But the industry platforms are decided from the top. And just for you to know, actually, there are different levels of platforms. So I now calls them fields and subfields. So subfields is a more specialized, let's say, instance of a platform, but it doesn't matter. The process is the same. Every platform has an owner. So again, there is always somebody taking responsibility for that, but he or she is not a boss. He's just representing a priority, a need, an investment, and he or she has the responsibility to attract people to take the money and to use the money. So I would say mostly the board. Let's see. Okay, as always, jump in if you have other questions.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Emanuele, but I think as you guys at Boundaryless, you use Sociocracy as a
Yep.
and RenDanHeYi in one, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that this question about who sets budgets, is it kind of would it be the similar concept here that if I'm the field owner, then by definition it's my responsibility to create the subfields that are within my purview, and the subfield owner would have responsibility to create platforms within the subfield, and so on and so forth. So there is a hierarchy that way, but it's
So first of all, Sociocracy and Holacracy. As I said, it's very easy to complement the RenDanHeYi with something else. What we are doing in Boundaryless is complementing it with Sociocracy. Sociocracy is the father, if you want, of Holacracy, to simplify it. It is 150 years old, not really new. And it has this concept of consent-based decision-making, meaning it's not autocratic, it's not consensual, so there is no boss telling you, but we don't need to agree. It's looking for objections. So if all objections have been integrated, the objections bring information, insights regarding a decision, we have a decision by consent. We use it in Boundaryless to basically to orchestrate the different micro enterprises. We don't have industry platforms. So for us, being a very small company, the industry platforms is really what in Sociocracy is called the governance circle that has representatives of all the micro enterprises. And it's the place in which investments are located. But decisions are made by consent. So nobody can say, no, we are not going to give you the money. Everybody can add information, add an objection and say, okay, we can ask, why do you want to have the money? Or yes, we are going to give you the money, but there are some other conditions that we may want to add. So it's a way to what I'm trying to say is that it's a way to make also this part of the design more peer-to-peer, more participative. But of course, Boundaryless is different, very different than higher. And that's why my suggestion is always to look at different models, take inspiration from different models and trying to combine them based on your specific goals, culture, trajectory, size, and so on. Some of the processes in higher are still centralized. So that's how it is. We didn't want to do that. The company is owned by different people, and each one of us wants to be an entrepreneur, wants to decide together with the other. This makes things more difficult, if you want, because there are many, preferences that you need to integrate somehow. I think the CEO calling the shots is easier, but the amount of engagement, if you want to attract other entrepreneurs, of course, is different. So, it's a matter of what you want to achieve as well. Thank you, Andreas, for the question. Okay, let's go on with some other questions. Do people working in MEs have any business as usual responsibilities or 100% focus on the micro enterprise, especially at pilot stage? I'm contrasting with the entrepreneur model where people are assigned, say, 40% to an innovation initiative, while 60% in their normal day job. So Andreas is an expert here, but I will give you my answer, and then he or anybody else can add. So, of course, one thing is hire. Hire the CEO that in 1984 came up with this model. They experimented for more than 30 years, and they made some aggressive moves also of people in the organization to implement the model. An example is they asked 10,000 managers to go and find a job in the organization. So stop being the one bossing people around and let's get some work done, right? That's probably not the best or the most legal even approach in other parts of Europe or America or Asia. So you cannot do that. So that means that you need a transition strategy to go from an hierarchical organization to something similar to RenDanHeYi. What it happens is that the strategy could be having people initially staying within their hierarchy, so in their box in the organization chart, and having some time to invest in something new, in this case, a micro enterprise. Of course, this has pros and cons, because you're going to have two priorities on the same table that are going to compete. You're not being able to focus on something, but it keeps the level of risk for the organization and the costs under control. So again, it's a common strategy to say, okay, we are going to have maybe an owner with 100% of his or her time, but the rest of the team will spend 50%. And while the micro enterprise is validated, we are going to increase the time and to increase the investment. And Andreas, if you want to, you can add on top of it. So what I'm trying to say here is that in hire, it's very difficult. In hire, an employee is usually an employee in one single micro enterprise, not because of the model, but because of the pressure, the demand that they have. It's basically impossible to do work in two micro enterprises, but nothing prevents you from being in two micro enterprises. In organizations that are trying to go in the same direction, so you need transition strategies. And this is one. Andreas, there is anything you want to add? So I don't know if Andreas wants to, but just go and read, let's say, the interview with Andreas, because he talked extensively about it. Andreas.
Yeah, but I think maybe I don't remember actually what state we were in when we spoke, when we did that interview, but the things might have changed.
Okay.
Maybe.
Flux.
So I think I know where this question comes from, because when we first started here, again, being a professional services firm, with like billable time and working for clients and etc. And we try to manage the costs of moving from one model to the next by gradually decreasing someone's allocation from billable time over to the ME. And we created this elaborate spreadsheets to calculate the cost and how that would work. And after a while, we basically looked at it and said, you know what? At the end of the day, you can't be an entrepreneur part-time. That's just not how it doesn't work like that. It's either full-time or nothing. So that's what we're doing right now. There is we have a let's call it an acceleration program, if you will, where stage one, we call it incubation, is basically we ask the to-be entrepreneur to work on their idea basically on their free time, during their business as usual. So it's a bit of sweat equity from their end. So they don't have to build a product or anything, but they need to put together basically a pitch deck, if you will, or something similar. So who's the customer, what's the need, how are you going to solve it, etc., etc. And just like Emanuele said before, there's some sort of committee to decide which of the MEs make it past incubation. And right now that committee is the entire company, because we're not that big. So like we'll do that voting together. And once an ME, and this is the plan at least, once an ME has made it out of incubation, they go into this quote unquote acceleration phase, and then that's when they go full time. And that's when basically we take them out of the billable workflow, and they have X number of months to hit certain milestones in order to continue. And at the end of that, I think the entire, if I can remember now, the entire journey, the entire acceleration journey from end to end is like 9 months. And if you make it past then, you become eligible to be spun off as a separate entity if you want to, or you can continue working as a BU within the company. But either way, you have you now have freedom to set your own salary, etc., because at that point you're basically paying for yourself. So
thank you, Andreas.
No problem.
Yes, let's say I think this is becoming a bit of best practice in the market. We are seeing it in different places. It's really a way to psychologically contain the fear, because you are not risking to sink the boat. On the other side, it's a way also for people to easy their transition from being an employee to becoming an entrepreneur. Of course, it's gradual, so it's maybe it takes a bit more time than just constraining everybody to act as an entrepreneur tomorrow morning. Also higher. So again, if you want to know more, just reach out, as a stage-gated process for the VAM. So when you get an investment, basically you're going from an idea to a company, even a unicorn. So there are some steps in which eventually you attract external investments. You formally become the owner of an entity. Higher is co-owner of that entity, until basically you are building companies that go beyond higher. So that's the model. Doesn't mean that all the micro enterprise go through all the stages. It's not mandatory. It's not possible, of course, but there is a unique opportunity here, and that's what higher says, to unlock the human potential. So really to make individuals happy about waking up morning because they're doing something that is meaningful to them. So the organization, instead of stopping them from getting it, is helping them, quite nudging them to act as entrepreneurs, to take the responsibility, to risk even their money, because they are investing their money in the micro enterprise. So higher says, yeah, put your money on the table. When you do that, of course, you are no longer an employee. Okay, let's move on to some other questions. I restructured a bit because we had some more questions. I'm curious to learn about Hire's use of smart contracts. Examples, if you have them. So we don't have access to the technology. Actually, the technology is really China specific. It's called the EMC Workbench. But we, as Boundaryless, we are building around, let's say, version of the infrastructure for the rest of the world. But in a nutshell, so if you look at the conceptual components of the smart contracts, you will find them into the VAM canvas. So the VAM canvas has been inspired really from the interface of their software, translated in English, of course, and from also some older win-win agreements that Hire had before creating the VAMs. So the suggestion is, please look at the VM canvas that we just released.
So sorry, me again. So I will definitely do that. So just to follow up on it. So you mentioned that the win-win value-added agreement, that was a precursor to the VAM?
Yeah. It was in one of their older manuals, let's say, and then it then became an Excel file, then became a software. So of course, higher. And by the way, you have it in the materials of the training. So there is a picture of it, but just reach out if you want. If you cannot find it, I will share it with you.
Thank you.
We also have the Excel, the original Excel, with a bit of Chinese, let's say, content. If you,
I have access to that one.
if you want. But let's say we try. Some of our attempts is to simplify and generalize a bit, because of course it's interesting to see the source, but then eventually you need to apply it in a different context. Okay, is there guidance around deciding when to terminate the pilot initiative? Otherwise, is there a risk that there are too many low pilot potential pilots, or do the people in the ME decide on this based on their income confidence? So on one side, maybe this is a difference between higher and many of the other experiments. There is no centralized killing function. So say there is nobody really judging, strictly speaking, judging the micro enterprises, but the VAM is quite specific. So in the VAM, you commit yourself as an owner about specific outcomes. So what is going to happen specifically when. So if you don't respect that, the company may have some patience and help you to improve, to get access to more resources, but usually in a matter of months, not years, months, the micro enterprise will be reshuffled, so the micro enterprise owner can change, the team may nominate somebody else, or the micro enterprise may be terminated. So there is lots of pressure here. It's usually self-imposed pressure. It's not just the company threatening people about firing them, but also keep in mind that failure is accepted here. It's quite welcome, because most micro enterprises will fail. So the idea is not to have only those micro enterprises that for sure will succeed. It's about having a massive experimentation process. Again, Jean Grimin has always talked about a rainforest. The focus is not the tree, it's the rainforest. It's creating the conditions for experimentation, messiness, learning, failure. So there is no stigma, let's say, in failing. Employees have this basic income in China. That is really basic. So they need to find micro enterprises or create micro enterprises to complement that. But they will still have a salary, even if the micro enterprise fails. And many organizations around the world don't have a universal basic income, but still are using the base salary of employees, let's say, to protect them, especially in the initial phase of this journey, to convince, of course, people to take responsibility. So what I would say is self-imposed pressure plus VAMs, let's say, agreements. Okay. Let's move to another one. Always stop me if you have more to add. Has there been consideration around implications for labor laws and responsibilities? If someone has to leave the parent organization, how are the legal responsibility the company has to the employee discharge? So, of course, this conversation is very much country specific. So this part, China is totally a different world here, but even the USA are different from Europe, and in Europe we have many variations. Germany has a very strong working council, let's say, history. Other countries are a bit more flexible. So we don't have any global, let's say, recommendations here. We are addressing it or wrestling with it in the different projects in the different parts of the world in which we are committed. For sure, there is a contractual, let's say, reflection to be made. In some of our projects, we are bringing in, say, the legal part of the organization, or those in charge of contracts. It could be councils. It could be also just trying to play on the safe side. So at the end, if you are not firing people, if you are guaranteeing their base salary and there are only upsides, of course, there is not much risk for them. The question is this enough to create skin in the game? Or do we want to be a bit more aggressive? It depends. It depends, of course, really on the single organizations. So here, I would say local answer. I don't know, Andreas, if you have anything to add, if you are ready at this point.
Yes and no. So we did have some considerations in terms of when we setting up the MEs and going. We were talking about the universal basic income and some people who want to do this. They're at quite high salaries. So how do we manage that? And in Thailand, where I'm based, like many other countries, it's illegal to decrease someone's salary. So we realized that we would have to sort of dismiss the person. They have to reapply, and we thought that was silly. So we ended up doing this other model that I told you about before, where people just maintain their salary and they go full on, but they have to do some work beforehand. And then once they're up and running, they are basically owners of their company. So there's they're either there or they're not. The company will cease to exist if they leave.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, couple more, and then if there is any question from the top, so from the dark green ones that you want addressed, just tell me, because otherwise I will skip them. Those were my questions, so I prefer to focus on your own questions. But if there is anything that you really care about, you want to address, happy to do that. Is there a general governance policy that guides the combination of areas of centralized control and the DATs stands for? William, you're on mute.
Decentralized autonomous teams, in other words, an
Okay.
ME.
Okay. I don't think there is a general governance policy. So what, at the best of my understanding, what there is this what we call the architecting leadership, meaning some basic rules. So you have industry platforms, an industry platform works, how a VAM works, an EMC contract works, but everything else is emergent. So you may have 3,000 micro enterprises in the same industry platform. Ideally speaking, of course, that won't be the case. So there is no high level coordination. The coordination really is emergent. That's that's what we have seen and what we are seeing also in the market. So what we do, we have in Boundaryless, we have a governance circle that takes care of that. But for us, it's much simpler because we have only that many micro enterprises. So you really know what the micro enterprises are doing. But when you have thousands of micro enterprises just directing all of them or deciding which one of the competing ones should proceed ends up being suboptimal. So it introduces lots of overhead, lots of disengagement. So the approach, it's probably, do it, compete it, let's see what happens. And we have seen it many times in here. So you may have multiple micro enterprises, somebody are progressing, some others are maybe just merged with the others or killed. So no centralization, it's really light or treated with respect, I would say.
Yeah. I think what I was trying to get at when you said earlier, and it just triggered this question, was there are things that are centrally controlled. You actually talked about one, like how resources might get invested in a platform, and then we bring up the shared services, IT, HR, et cetera.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find out what are the non-negotiable areas of decision making on those areas that are centrally controlled on behalf of the ecosystem, so it enables the ecosystem to perform the way it does. And you know, I'm just wondering, is there a decision governance policy on those elements that are centrally controlled? Because this is the big myth that a lot of people get into. It's all decentralized. Well, it's not. And that almost brings some comfort to, you know, an executive group to go, oh, there are areas that we still can actually have governance over and do our work, et cetera. And of course, even that's different. But that's what spurred this question was, okay, where is the pocket of centralization that allows the full ecosystem to be operating with its dynamic, you know, spontaneity?
Yeah. So to me here, the answer is really, it depends, in the sense that the organization has a responsibility here. Let me give you one example. If you look at what the GEA does, so General Electric Appliances in the US, what they have is having a shared service platform that does sales. So there is somebody, sellers, you know, salespeople, going there and selling products, because historically it was how they were organized. In China, that's not the case. So salespeople are infused into the micro enterprises. So even what could be a centralized function actually is decentralized in China. It's centralized in the US. And in every organization design, this is one of the most important questions. We just did a project, and the question was really, how can we guarantee the standardization, economy of scale, consistency, control? Ayer's answer is that you will need some, for sure. Where and how you want to have it, it depends. Even when you talk about HR, we are fragmenting HR in many entrepreneurial teams. So it's true that they provide services to everybody, but they go under the same rules that everybody gets, right? So it's centralized, but it's still entrepreneurial to some extent. So it's already a step forward if compared to the monolithic organization. But the question is really a question of scale and a question of standardization. Just to give you an example, when you have a compliance function, probably you are not going to decentralize it, because of course it's there to guarantee the business, but also the market about some behaviors and some decisions, right? So that is going to stay centralized. Legal could be the same. Marketing, not always, it depends, let's say. But this question of what keeping at the center, what distributing is a critical one to me. I don't think there is a single answer though. So I would say not a single answer, a critical design decision. Okay, moving ahead and then jumping to the other board, is there a time frame for the VAM process? I don't know if you mean the inflection points in the VAM or the process of signing a VAM. Signing a VAM, I don't know, it's quite quick, let's say. So it's just a matter of negotiation between the parties. The VAM can go from a few months, 1 year, to something more than 1 year, but it's usually quick. So it's not, 10 years. Everything is very quick in a year. Just keep in mind that in 6 months, they created the unicorns. In 6 months. So everything is a bit accelerated, and the idea is really to get things going, to distribute responsibilities, to see results coming. So the VAM usually has a multiple months horizon. But again, it depends. Let's say 6, 12 months is common. It could be also longer than that, of course. But let's say it's not usually years and seeing what happens after that. Does here exist a basic set of business metrics ME should follow, measure, or it fully depends on domain business? No, so the only request here is a leading target. And you will get some help. So there are some MEs helping you with figuring out what a leading target for you would be. Looking at competitors, looking at the market. So you're going to negotiate based on data, based on numbers. It won't be 3% better. It's probably going to be 50% better, 100% better. So you need to really come up with something strong. But the commitment is yours. So you can imagine the VAM largely as a self-set, let's say, target that is approved or validated by the company, but there is the responsibility of the micro enterprise. There is no cascading down process. It's bottom up with intervention from the top, but it's bottom up. That's why there is so much commitment, of course, skin in the game and all of it. Okay, one last question from Augustin before we move to the other board. And for the rest of the team, please feel free to start adding your questions here. So in the second board, we are going to talk about the transformation more than the specifics of the higher model. So if there is any question about how can I create a new micro enterprise, what happens? So at the top, you have some examples, the culture, failure, amount of time, where do you want to focus when you create a micro enterprise, how to scale it? Let's say those are all questions that you may be interested to address. Okay, let's pick the last one here. What happened with the members of the ME that fail? So again, this is one side hire, and then this is another area to design, if you want, as some of you know, in your own organization. So what happens in hire is that the individuals go back to the talent pool. So the talent pool is like a list of all the available resources at a specific point in time that have universal basic income and that are available to be invited to join other micro enterprises. Okay, so that's it. In other organizations, of course, this may be perceived with a bit more fear, because we, for example, in Europe, we tend to see failure as a negative thing. So if my micro enterprise failed, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm never going to be invited to a new opportunity, and maybe I'm going to be fired. So answering these questions is part of the model. The micro enterprises will fail, for sure. They will. So what are you going to do? Are you going to put people back into the hierarchy? Are you going to help them create a new micro enterprise? Are they losing their car, their corner office, their plants and flowers? There are some status elements into the corporate life as well that go under discussion in these cases. So this has to be accepted, and a ME life cycle has to be created. But in hire, it's just common, and it's up to you as an individual to find or to create new opportunities. This is a basic demand that you have at any point in time. It's not just hire. There are many other examples. Valve, company doing video games, is the same. You have to pick your own projects. So it's up to you to find opportunities. It's not the company allocating you. It's called open allocation. Okay, going to the other side. Please, if you have questions about adoption, or if there is anything that you want to see from the top, so the dark blue questions, feel free to fire. So here again, the question is: running transformation, any curiosity? Let's spend a few minutes to write here at the bottom, or to pick some of the questions from the top. Yeah, if you want to just go through my questions at the top, please do that. Somebody wrote about the BMI. Okay, just a few more moments to see if you have a question. Oops. Stephanie, please undo. Thank you. Yeah, not everything is blocked, I guess. Yeah. I mean, okay, start to have some questions. Andres, is there any question that remains unanswered from where you are? So quite a mature part of the journey. You're on mute if you're talking.
My apologies. I was having a separate conversation.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah. So would you mind asking?
Yeah, if there is still any aspect on which you haven't made your mind, even at your stage. So, you know, advanced questions when you are already along the journey.
Oh, I see. Okay. Let me think about that.
Okay. Okay. I'll let Pete finish, and then we'll start picking some of these questions. Okay, let's start with the first question. What about legal regulations of finance institutions? How does that work with the law hierarchy? I don't know who wrote this, if you can explain it.
Yeah, I was wondering with the institutional part of the RenDanHeYi model, and I think Ariana is here from a bank, right?
Yes.
And I was just wondering, because often I hear, well, that's systems like that are not possible because we are highly regulated as a financial institutes. And I was just wondering if you can share your experience with it.
Of course. Actually, Stephanie, we are in a very, we can say, startup first approach stage, so that we are trying to understand how to manage this kind of model with the regulating pressure that we have. And we in Italy, we are also very complex in terms of labor law. So this is just one of the point of attention that actually we have. What we are doing is just trying to put around the table not only organization design, HR, or legal department, just to co-design this kind of model, but also all the we can say governance competencies, so that around the table there are also audit, compliance, risk, and all together we are trying to understand if there are some chances just to implement maybe not the exact model that higher is playing, of course, but something that maybe is tailored for us, considering just that we are highly regulated.
I think Arianna is raising an interesting point in terms of transformation. So if you want, there are two very different approaches. One is let's try it and see if anybody is going to fire us or to put us in jail, let's say. And that's the typical approach of the startup. The other approach is very structured, and it tries to address all the complexity that a big bank has. And instead of just doing it, what Arianna was describing is the attempt to bring everybody at the table, not just because of the answers that they could bring, but also because of the weight, political weight they have, of course. And this is a very long exercise. It's not easy, exactly because of what I think the reasons of your question, Stephanie. Just keep in mind, we had a meeting with Arianna with 250 people. That was a small group actually, right? Because they have 80,000. So to many of them, this is really heresy. They never heard about progressive organizational models. They don't believe this is possible. They don't see the impact on them. So they really have to be, say, interested, help to get to put the attention on this new approach and to understand the implications, because even at the individual level there are implications. And there are important stakeholders that need to protect the firm from doing expensive mistakes, fines, but maybe even worse. But my surprise, I must say, is that for how complex and long this process is, it's happening. And from my meetings with all these people, they had very variable points of view, not just saying no, but saying, hey guys, have you considered this? Hey guys, have you considered that? And it was always something we should consider. So right, in this kind of complexity, my answer is it is possible. It takes lots of work to stay on the safe side. Plus, eventually you have to try it. So you still need pilots, you still need experimentations, because I think we have a board with, I don't know, 50 questions, something like that, or 39, with many of these questions, right? But unless you do it, it will be very difficult to get all the questions, to get all the answers right. And even in the pilots, you will get different answers. So the model will be influenced by the different pilots. It takes courage, but that's why we are here, and that's what we are trying to attempt. It's possible, though.
If I may, I can share the example of what we did in Big Czech Bank. It's owned by Erste, so maybe it would be known. It's about like 3,000 people, but the headquarter was about like 600, 800. And okay, I said 3,000, maybe it's 6,000, but huge number. But it was like just the headquarters. And what we did was actually 3 steps. The first one was, if you do discovery, if you do some sort of discovery on your products and services, to involve these roles and these people in the discussion. Because as was said, usually they say typically like, no, you are not allowed to do this, or you have to do this. And if you have this validation phase on your ideas, so it helps to co-create with them. Then it helped a lot to somehow change the organizational structure. And then we created sort of like these autonomous teams that are organized around the products or services products. And these people already participated somehow in those teams. And the final step that we did was also creating a new unit. And the unit was focused somehow on innovations. And in the discovery of those innovations, we somehow involved people from all the possible units or teams, units, how to call it, from the company. And like risk, compliance people and others were involved as well. and they somehow obtain the mindset or get used to that mindset and approach to co-create together and be more proactive in proposing solutions. So these are the things that we did, and it worked pretty well in the big bank that's owned by German culture, you know.
Cool. Yeah. So, you know, every time we discover new stories, and now, Jarek, I want to know more, of course, about what you are doing. But this is even more confirmation that it's possible. And just to give you another example, I've done work with ING, for example, in the Netherlands. Not specifically on the RenDanHeYi, but still on other self-management approach. So I think there are many banks are quite mature with agile, and many of them are looking to go beyond that. So to infuse a higher level of autonomy, to embrace a bit of risk, to address the pressure from fintechs as well. So if you want or not, but there is something you have to do. And I think we start to have examples. Another example of a progressive bank is Handelsbanken, Svenka. They have been leading the market for 47 years. So they are a very flat organization in which the branch is like a micro enterprise. So it's quite similar to what it's very flat. It's quite similar to what we are describing. So I wouldn't say this is totally new in the financial institutions space. Of course, also in pharma, there are some barriers that you need to respect if you don't want to get in trouble. Okay, let's move to the next one. Can you share experience about introducing, implementing a talent pool? I must say, again, I can talk about what Ayer did, but strictly speaking, I've never seen it done in Europe, for example. So the starting point in Europe is very often an existing hierarchy. So you don't have a talent pool. You have people that are stuck into an organization chart. You have bosses that don't want to let them go and work in new entities, bosses that have an MBO that is connected to these people and that feel, as a feeling of possession with those people. And those are mine. They're not, of course, but those are mine. So I won't ever let you go and do work beyond my area. So there is no talent pool. What we are using instead is transformation hacks. So finding ways to making it easier for bosses of business units, traditional business units, to embrace this idea of letting some of their colleagues, maybe for part of their time, to embrace something new. And we do that for two reasons. The first one is that those employees otherwise are at risk of jumping ship, of leaving the company. It means that these people are looking for something else. The organization can provide it and has the opportunity to do it, or can just increase the friction, and eventually that person will leave the organization, bringing the knowledge and relational capital with him or her. But the second reason is that this is good for business units as well. So it's an opportunity, a unique opportunity for business units to innovate. So we are defining acts to share some of the value. Before we were talking about sharing value in the VAM and to the EMC contract, sharing some of the value created by these new units with the existing business units. So if as a business unit owner, I let some of my people work on something else, I will benefit from it, even from a profit perspective. So at the end of the year, this will contribute to my MBO. At the end of the year, this will contribute to my business unit in a traditional sense. So you will see it on your results. Again, these are transition acts. It's not perfect, but if you're starting from a hierarchy, it's very unwise to just go straight against the hierarchy and say, yeah, let's get rid of the hierarchy. Let's break everything down. probably you won't be welcomed, let's say, by the organization. So it's always looking at ways to connect the new model to the existing model, very often without dismantling the existing model at the beginning, but establishing some pull forces for which people will find it more convenient and stimulating to work in the new way, even without destroying the old way. But this is my experience. I don't know if there are other experiences in the room. And while I'll try to write it. Transitional acts from the hierarchy to the new structure. Is it possible to start small in just one pocket of an organization? I love this question. Yes, it's possible. Actually, I believe it's mandatory. So if you are talking about big organizations, of course, if you are talking about 3 people, 30 people, 50 people, okay, you can risk a bit more in terms of scope, at least. And again, you have Make as an example, but we just shared the story of Gummy Industries, that it's another agency with 60 people that went through the entire process, even incorporating a new entity in less than 1 year. So in a matter of months. So this is possible. But let's say if we are in a big organization, there is no manual for it. There is fear. So the only way, and the process I suggested is, let's create the interest in your organization so that some of your colleagues will come to you to try it in their own areas. So they will be the sponsors, the owners, let's say, of the new micro enterprises, and they will translate these ideas into their reality. That's the only way. You may have 1, you may have 2, you may have 10 at the same time, but basically you have the possibility to experiment with it in pockets of the organization and to learn from it, because that's the only realistic way to get answers about what's needed, what will work, what won't work. Just to give an example, we cannot assume that everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. It's not true. Especially in some cultures, it's really untrue. Maybe William, Andreas can also comment on that. So in the USA, we're using some behaviors, very individualistic, very proactive, very aggressive, very entrepreneurial. Maybe in Asia, that's not really the case. In some countries, in China or in Japan, and Japan is another example of higher implementation, there's deference with your superiors. So you never talk before them if they're in the room. So no way you can just hijack the hierarchy. So the organization has to allow this, has to create some safe spaces for experimentation with the involvement of the bosses. No, there is no other way around. You cannot just ignore this. If you ignore this, you are doomed since the very beginning. So I would say yes. Okay, how has the journey been regarding remote versus in-person teams? Some of the conversation I hear are that for innovation entrepreneurial situations, in person is better. But with many teams constantly reforming, I can imagine many teams are distributed. I think this is a broader topic, of course. Most of the world in the last 2 years went through a transition to hybrid work. In some places, this has been easier, in some places less. But at least in our experience, and here I'm talking about Boundaryless, this is possible. In many of the small examples that we have seen, this is just a reality. It was possible even before the pandemics. I don't see many, to be sincere, many implications connected with the RenDanHeYi, with hybrid work. Of course, this is a big transition. So initially, you need to put the right level of attention to it. There would be resistance. So initially, you need also co-location. You need people in the same room. You need people to be able to ask questions, to learn from their peers, to get access to executives. But again, also Arianna in this case can talk about that. I never met Arianna, so in person yet. But we have been working for months, and I met many of our colleagues the same. It's you know, it's I think it's an opportunity that has to be balanced also with our human, let's say, needs, especially after 2 years or so of pandemics. But I think it's possible to leverage it. Arianna, what do you think?
I was just thinking the same. Nowadays, of course, we started, we learned how to work differently. And so I think that, of course, a model transformation, it would be maybe harder for a certain point of view, but on the other side, remotely, we are just able just to do everything. So maybe, of course, I think it's possible. Maybe harder, but possible.
Yeah, keep in mind also that many of the large organizations have been distributed forever. So if you have colleagues in Germany or in the USA or in Thailand, you were already in different continents and time zones before the pandemic. So even if you're in the office, actually, the people you work with are not. And it happened to me. I had a team with people in India. I met them after 5 years. So, and in India, they didn't have even surnames. So I didn't know the surname of the guys because they only used the names. So it was sort of, you know, experience when we finally met. It was you know, a celebration party, but it was possible. There was trust, there was daily interaction. I think we are just getting a bit more used to that. And the level of autonomy that we see in the RenDanHeYi eventually, so when you are mature and the transformation facilitates that, it's up to the team. So the team can decide if they want to stay together or not, if they want to meet every day or not. I think what is important is the flexibility and the autonomy that the organization should allow. And this is now something that we all more or less expect. Okay, last 2 questions. This is very difficult from William. I have seen it already. So how might one calculate the BMI cost of the organization so that a board can understand at least the economic return that is possible if they embark on a RenDanHeYi transformation? So there was a question on the top that was, how can we explain this to a board? Very often we get this question, but show me the hard returns of this. Typically a CEO or a board of a big corporation. And BMI is an index to understand instead of obesity, let's say the bureaucracy mass of an organization that Gary Hamel and Michele Zanini talk about in their Humanocracy book. So for sure, the RenDanHeYi is an attempt to dismantle the level of bureaucracy. I have no clue, to be sincere, William, about how they calculated it, but for sure, if you think about the time you need to make decisions, and we have proved that this time has been increasing in corporations in the last decades. If you look at the number of people you need to engage, you need to involve to make, for example, a purchasing decision, it has increased. So the number of missed opportunities that you have has been increasing. So Drager in 1988 had this prediction saying that he was expecting the number of managers and managerial layers to be reduced by 50% and 75%. Actually, it was wrong. So it didn't happen. This number of managerial layers increased 90%, It's the only role that increased with a cost of $8.4 trillion globally. So we are really in trouble. And one of the biggest potential effects of the RenDanHeYi is to get rid of this. So if you have teams without managers, if you reduce the weight of support functions, if you balance everything against the outcomes for customers, of course, we're reducing the bureaucracy level. That's for me is definitely one. If you want, I can share a deck that we prepared with all the returns that we have seen in the companies implementing the RenDanHeYi. So we collected examples from Haier, from Fujitsu, from GA, and from some other companies describing the effects. I wouldn't call it, systematic framework. It's more anecdotes of the benefits that they have measured in this case, not just felt, measured. And if you look at Haier in Germany and in Italy in 2020 grew 60%. So and in Europe, I think it's more than double digit for all the last year. And GEA in the US had the best year in 100 years. So I think the signals are all there. And I can share also the categories of benefits that we are looking at. So we have a list of dimensions on which we build business cases. Again, it's not done, but I think there is at least indications about the value. So I'll take note about the decisions, people involved, managerial layers, etc. I think this could be a starting point to look at the RenDanHeYi. Okay, next one. Is there a right-wrong way to start, inside out versus outside in? Who wrote this? Who wants to comment on it?
No, that was me. You asked me if I had any,
But you need to answer yourself now.
Yes. No. Let me. I don't have the answer. That's the unfortunate part. But I can explain the predicament. Being a company that Make has been around for 10 years, and we've experimented a lot with new and better ways of working for a long time. Be it sociocracy or holocracy or agile or design thinking or whatever. And one of the things that attracted me to RenDanHeYi, one of the many things, was this customer centricity, the outside in focus, because I knew this was something that we needed as an organization. But even so, and this got very much highlighted during the recent certification process that we went through, and a lot of the feedback that we got was that we were not enough customer focused, but we were still focused very much on our own employees and our own, like, how we run our organizations, with what job roles we have, how we set salaries, and all those things. That's not to say that we don't do customer research and we don't listen to customers, but it was a clear bias toward what works for our people as opposed to what works for the customer. And it was a bit of a hard nut to swallow. That's a wrong analogy, but because it was true. It hit a little bit too close to home, and it really got me thinking. What are us thinking here? Saying, okay, we're a professional services firm. We're mainly in the B2B business. What does true customer centricity look like for us? And what if we had started our transformation journey outside in rather than inside out? And how would that have been different? Maybe we would have been made more progress faster. So I don't know what the answer is. It's just one of those things that I've been thinking about, and I was telling you earlier today that if you read anything about RenDanHeYi, you come across this term business ecosystem over and over again. And I've read it 150,000 times at this point, and somehow it's sort of, I missed the real meaning of it until very recently, and I basically sort of rediscovered what the ecosystemic part of the whole thing actually means, and that's in the hands of thinking about the outside-in perspective. So there's a lot to unpack there. So I don't have any answers, just problems.
No, thank you. I think this is a very important point. Ayer talks about zero distance and even the concept of the RenDanHeYi means every employee in contact, creating value with every customer, right? So it's really about exposing all of them. What we believe at Boundaryless is that, and I'm in love with organization design, right? So let's say I'm probably more broad to the organizational space than the market space. But in Boundaryless, we believe in a unified market firm theory. So we believe that the opportunity is really in the market. Is really by looking at running ecosystem scans. We have another approach called the Platform Design Toolkit that looks at opportunities for the customers in the market by playing a different role in the market. And this is technically speaking the inputs for some of the canvases. So in some of the canvases, for example, the micro enterprise canvas, you need to know the business model that you're going to use. You're going to know how costs and revenues are going to scale. That means that you need to know what you're going to do in the market. Otherwise, you have no answer. So that's an interlock with the rest. And the starting point for the micro enterprise is it's not the technicality of all the inflections, it's the value proposition. What is your unique contribution to the market? Eventually, even if you are not a micro enterprise, even if you are an SSP, you're going to have an impact on the market. I think this is a very difficult switch to do, but I agree, it's probably the most important because most of our organizations are bureaucratic because they do the opposite. So we try to protect our status quo, our space, our advantages, never asking or not enough asking ourselves enough about what's the impact for the customer, for the market. The fact that salaries in the RenDanHeYi are paid by the customers make this a bit easier because at the end of the month, probably you're going to see that. But still, it's a long process. It's not easy. Here, I would just say, inside out, at least for me, very hard to do. So it's probably it's a direction more than a starting point. Last question: how to measure the success of the pilot if it is applied to a new business? Of course, most of the RenDanHeYi, it's about disruption. So you are trying to do something that doesn't exist. You have no baseline. It's difficult to benchmark. But the VAM here really helps with betting in the best way possible. So what you do, similarly to what you do in a startup, is writing down what you expect to do. So the metrics, the targets that you expect to realize in the new business. So from this perspective, it's very traditional. You are betting. You don't know. You are betting. You are making some educated guesses. You're asking for resources, and then you are checking what happens after 3 months, after 6 months, after 12 months, and so on. The only help you have is coming from the previous question. So if you know what you want to achieve in terms of impact on the market, for example, if you want to switch from a product to a service to an ecosystemic play, of course, you know what you will measure at a high level, but then the numbers and the metrics are going to be written into the VM. Again, that's what we are seeing. So we are really at the top of the hour. It's been 2 hours actually. So thank you so much for spending 2 hours with us. If there is interest, of course, we'll organize other meetings of this kind. we'll share a post. We'll share the recording with all of you and with the rest of the world. As always, if you want to know more, just go online. You will find the Trio Toolkit on our site, www.boundaryless.io. Yeah, feel free to reach out if there is something you want to discuss, something you want to share, or if you want to join one of our events. So far, thank you so much for being with us. Nice to see some known faces. Nice to see some new faces. Let's stay in touch because I think we really need to share to make this community grow. Thank you. Have a nice evening or afternoon, depending on where you are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Or
Bye.
night.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.